Hello and welcome to King of Our Nightmares. I'm Jeremy,
I'm Noah.
and we're talking about Stephen King's only straight fantasy novel, The Eyes of the Dragon, which has a really interesting history and is kind of a pivotal book in some ways, even though he really has never touched this genre since. But it's an important King work if you go further into the King rabbit hole. So Noah, what is it about?
What it's about? Well, it's a classic medieval-esque fantasy story.
Already having technical issues.
Great.
So
It's to be
what's
expected.
what's the German title to this?
It actually is just a literal translation, The Eyes of the Dragon.
That's shocking.
I know, very shocking.
Sorry, get cat issues here. Ugh.
Mhm.
Kept biting me. So what's the synopsis of this book, Noah?
Okay, it's basically a classic medieval-esque fantasy story about an old king, his two sons, one good, one kind of bad. We can
Kind of
get into that.
pathetic.
Yeah, and an evil, wizard, a certain sorcerer that we know, and him
Goes by
manipulating all the stuff, you know, and you can pretty much, you get the story from that alone. It's a
Mhm.
very classic setup. It's not complicated. What carries it is, you know, King's writing and his style in this, and the
Which is
connections, I guess.
yes, because this is a Dark Tower book in a sense.
Yeah, it's basically the first Dark Tower spin-off.
Yeah, I know that in later Dark Tower books, he'll say that it is the first Dark Tower spinoff. It's
Hmm.
really not, except for being a creature of Toadash and stuff that he makes up later to explain things. This is really the first Tower spinoff because this is the antagonist is Flag. He's called Flag in this. It's clearly Randall Flag or Martin or Walter, whatever he feels like being that day. He's a he's a wizard that's lived for basically forever. And he just comes back every so often to reap havoc on this kingdom. And he's been there this time probably for 3 generations, possibly 4.
Mhm.
He just waited for a king that he could easily manipulate. And so he starts scheming and he blames the death of the king on the older brother Peter because Peter is the stronger of the two boys. If you get Peter out of the way, he can manipulate Thomas, the younger one, and just reap havoc because he's evil. He's just simply evil. But it's a very simple story, but it's sort of an archetype for things to come.
Hmm.
Um, Specifically, like Wind Through the Keyhole is written very similarly to this. Fairy Tale, which came out a couple years ago, similar. But this was written for his daughter, Naomi, who she can't relate to his horror works. It's like I don't know what it is, but he's like, "Can you write like a fantasy book?" And he said, "Okay," and he did. And this was written in '84, had a limited release run, and then was released again for like everyone in like the '87, I believe. But you can tell that he's not really on the drugs in. while writing this. It's coherent. Although there's weird shipping between his daughter and Peter Straub's son, who are both kind of characters in this. Which, if I have a negative for this book, I didn't like them. And the dogs, because his daughter's has a sled team of like dogs. And Peter Straub's son is the best friend of the king, but he's like a peasant. Which their friendship's kind of nice. It's not very developed because this book's really short. But yeah, there's like a weird romance that gets forced in at the end of this book, and I'm not a fan of it. It's kind of like the one weird thing about this book, because like Stephen King's daughter's not into men, which just makes this weirdly funny and strange. I don't know. It's a solid book. Despite that, it's barely it's like in a medieval setting, but it's not very fantasy-esque, if that makes sense.
Except for Flag, I guess.
And there are dragons.
And dragons. Yeah.
But the dragons don't really living dragons don't play a part. I like how clever the title of this book is. Which I will not explain. But you get it early on, and you're like, oh, this is why it's called The Eyes of the Dragon. I don't know. I think people expect this book to just be like an adventure, and they have to take down a dragon, something like really simplistic like that, but it's not. It's told as if it's a story being told to like by a campfire.
Yes, like the narrator is not really a character, but he addresses the reader directly.
Yeah. Like this is a legend. And I like he's a merciful narrator. I say this because Stephen King does something similar in the last Dark Tower book, not Wind Through the Keyhole. He obviously does. He has a similar setup in Wind Through the Keyhole, which we'll talk about when we get to Wind Through the Keyhole. But in the 7th Dark Tower book, there are a handful of like scenes where King like warns the audience that they aren't gonna like what happens. I think it happens twice. Because I guess he knew that everyone that was a Dark Tower fan was going to be like upset at the end of that. But anyway, Dark Tower connections in this, of course, Flag's like the big one.
Then the king is named Roland.
Yes. Rita the Coos, who's in Wizard and Glass, is referenced in this as like an evil legend. What's the other? Drawing of the Three will directly reference this book.
Yes, it's basically like a mini sequel. It's going to address the ending of this book. And Delain, the kingdom. Well, one, it sounds like Dejane, Roland Dejane's last name in Dark Tower.
Yes.
But it's also mentioned in Dark Tower that it's like a place, like it is here. Not exactly the same one, because this one feels different than the Dark Tower world.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like Midworld at all. It's like how the territories, until based on what King last tweeted, they weren't Midworld.
No, they were clearly like just medieval-ish fantasy worlds. But I think the biggest connection, besides the drawing of the free one, is in the Little Sisters of Eluria, where Delain is also mentioned, and Roland himself says, "Oh, that place is famous for dragons," and it's been said every lie comes from Delane, which is, related to the plot of this.
Fair enough. I've never read Little Sisters of Eluria except for the comic adaptation, and I don't think they reference Eyes of the Dragon in that.
Mhm.
But yeah, there's not a whole lot to talk about with this, simply because it's just like a solid short read, and the less you know about it, I think keep your expectations like, I don't know how to put it. Like, it's a different story. It's a really refreshing story.
Mhm.
It's not very gross, although there's some heinous death.
Yeah, this is not an adrenaline rush. This is like basically what it is, a dad telling his young child a little fantasy story.
Mm-hmm.
And also what makes it such a quick read, the chapters are very short and to the point.
Oh yeah. Every chapter is like really short. It's like you're gonna hate this. It's like a Kevin J. Anderson book. That's not always true. Sometimes he gets into really long chapters, but a lot of times he'll just have like 100+ chapters, and they're all just like really short. I don't think a chapter was more than like 20 minutes long in the audiobook.
Yeah, I mean, I remember some chapters in here are like half a page.
Mm-hmm. Some of them are one sentence.
Oh yeah, that happens later on. That's fun.
Yeah, which is like Drawing of the Three, which we'll be reviewing next, does that as well.
Mm.
Which I can't wait for that one. That'll be fun.
Yeah.
Almost all the things we have left are going to be fun, except
Mhm.
for a certain too long of a book that I hate. But we'll get there. We will get there soon, ish. What would you rank the? Oh, go on.
How I would rank? Okay, I had two things left to say.
Okay.
Related to the book. The first is the original title, or like the working title, which is plot related. The Napkins.
Oh, terrible title.
Yeah, that's why it was changed, I guess.
It's like naming your book Always Holly.
He also changed that, thank God. But the interesting thing I want to talk about, Eyes of the Dragon, the copy I own, which is from, I think, 2011, that was the first complete German translation of Eyes of the Dragon. Because they did that back in the day with King, because it's like lesser writing. It's just like, just get it out.
A
keep it
Cliff
cheap.
Notes version?
Well, no. Okay, so my copy is like 500 pages. It used to be 300 or so. Like, they actually just cut out a lot of stuff. In this case, they cut out chapters with like plot relevant information. When a character learns something that's important, that's gonna play a part in how they're gonna act and stuff. Yeah, that was cut out.
That's weird.
Yep. And it stayed like that for decades. That's amazing. That's why I always tell German people, don't buy old, used Stephen King books specifically, because they're going to be badly translated and probably very abridged.
Yeah, that's bizarre.
Mm-hmm.
Why would you do something like that? I don't get why your country does this with books.
They did it with King books, and I guess just like books where it's like this is just mainstream horror stuff. Who cares? I guess it's to keep it cheap.
But they did that with the Hand of Thrawn duology, where they broke up the
Yeah, well, in that case, they actually translated the full thing and just split Vision of the Future in 2 books. Where you can, in total, it would have been 800 pages in total, which is possible. as a paperback, but they were like, we're gonna split that, you know. But in this case, they just ripped out chapter after chapter, and you get an
So-
incoherent mess.
That's so weird because this book's so short.
I know. It's
I get doing
like
that.
they did that with it.
That's not surprising. I mean, it's a terrible idea, but
If you're gonna rip something out of a book, it's either it or The Stand.
I mean, he had to rip out stuff himself from The Stand.
Yeah.
I can't believe I read both versions of The Stand. We don't have to talk about it again.
Mhm.
I mean, we will. We'll always have to talk about that because that's like the most important King book ever for some reason.
Lots of connections to it. You know.
Lots of connections. We're going to have a whole set of short stories, which I think Chuck Wendig is writing one of them.
Oh, yeah, that's happening this year, right?
Yes, it's the other King release for this year, and King's not even writing anything for it.
Mm-hmm.
I
Well,
think
he's writing a foreword, I think.
Oh,
Do you remember when he announced he was thinking about writing a short story about Stu and Franny from The Stand?
yeah, that was last year, wasn't it?
Oh, no, that was like years ago. I think like 2016-ish.
Oh, God.
Yeah, he was like, he has an idea, something, she falls in a well or something.
Yeah, and a little like suspense story because they
Yeah, and then nothing became of it.
probably because it wasn't very good.
Well, but here we now we get Chuck Wendig to do it right.
Oh yeah, he's the important one. He's the most important author ever. Just ask Disney Star Wars. It's like the only thing they ever reference that isn't written by Dave Filoni.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, it's about. I don't have much more to say with this other than go check it out. If you're not a King fan, I would recommend this book.
Oh, definitely. This
if
is
you're-
one we have to point out. This is one that's bordering on YA. Like in the if you're like if you have a young child and you want to get them into reading, this is fine. Like this isn't really graphic. It's not really sexual. This is a very different type of King book.
There's a
This is more of a
little-
YA book than The Girl Who Loved Tom Gordon.
Yes, there's less swearing. There is some sexual stuff in the beginning.
There's that one thing which is handled tastefully and kind of
Yes.
jokingly.
That is the other thing. Things that King normally doesn't handle tastefully are handled tastefully, probably because this was written for his daughter. I don't know. It's so strange that whole thing with Peter Straub's son and
Yep.
Naomi King. It's just weird. It's just a weird thing to put in.
Mm-hmm.
Don't ship your kids with your friends' kids. I
Yeah.
know that for some reason, like previous generations have found that acceptable. It's not. Don't do it. That's weird. That's really weird. I'm just throwing that out there, but like,
Yeah, I mean, I found it weird when reading because the dedicate, like, even if you don't know this was written for like his child, the dedication is like, for his daughter Naomi and Ben Straub.
uh-huh.
And then the character who's based on Ben Straub is named Ben Stead.
Uh-huh.
Like 14-year-old me can make that connection.
Yeah, it's not rocket science.
Yeah, I mean, at least it's kind of funny in hindsight.
Oh yeah, they probably have laughs about it at Thanksgiving.
Mm-hmm.
Wonder how Peter Straub felt about this. Probably didn't care one way or the other. But anyway, that's about all I have. A nice short one for today.
Yeah.
It's nice to every once in a while have one of these that isn't over 2 hours.
Yeah, this is the perfect book after it.
Agreed. I'm glad we didn't go directly into Drawing of the Three.
Mhm.
It's granted that book's significantly shorter than it, but there's a lot of weird things to talk about with that.
Mhm.
And the whole error King made in how the streets of New York are set up, and the two retcons for that, which is unnecessary, but we'll talk about it next time. So
Mhm.
anyway, I give it a solid 4 out of 5. Well worth your time to check out. Same for you?
Oh yeah, definitely. One of the best. I think it's just outside my top 10.
Yeah, like I said, I don't think it'd make my top 10 either. Maybe because, like, especially if we're counting Bachman,
Yes, yes.
the Bachman books have a twisted special spot in my heart. And probably almost all of them would be in the top 10. The exception of maybe 2 of them. But anyway, have a nice day.